Well, Justice Minister Mmamoloko Kubayi has apologized to UN Special Rapporteur on occupied Palestinian territories, Francesca Albanese, for an unauthorized attempt to serve her with court papers. A US Christian group supporting the National Jewish Advocacy Centre made the move while she was addressing the Nelson Mandela Annual Lecture yesterday. The department has confirmed that the process was done without the approval of either the minister or the Director General as required by law. Kubayi ordered the withdrawal of the process and reaffirmed South Africa's commitment to the rule of law and international obligations. Now, in September, the Christian group's representative filed a case in Colorado. It accuses Albanese of using her title and platform to smear Israel and promote apparent anti-Semitism. Now, for more on this, we are joined by international relations expert Ayesha Kajee. Thank you so much for your time, Ayesha. I think it really is one of those moments where we have to take a reflection as South Africa. But how serious is this breach diplomatically? And what message does it send about our systems and controls?
Well, I, as does the Nelson Mandela Foundation and the United Nations, welcome the move by the Department of Justice to apologize both to the Foundation and the United Nations and Ms. Albanese for this breach in its systems. But yes, it does appear that somebody acted without the proper authorization, because this is a case that is happening in the United States. It has no jurisdiction in South Africa in legal terms. So someone in the DOJ did act apparently without authorization. And according to the Minister of Justice, there is going to be an internal investigation into this. We welcome the results of that investigation being made public when that investigation is completed. And it would be good to know exactly who was behind it, whether they were paid to do it, and on what basis they agreed to do it, because it is clearly not aligned with South African law or indeed with our Constitution, which upholds freedom of expression up to and including the limits of hate speech. So, and Ms. Albanese has made it very clear, not only now, but throughout the last 2 years, that she is by no means an anti-Semite. She is very respectful of the Jewish faith, but she does speak against the conflation of the state of Israel and of the Zionist ideology, of that conflation of Zionism with Judaism. And she is not the only one who speaks against this. Many Jews themselves, for example, my colleagues and friends within the South African Jews for a Free Palestine movement, they also are very upset that their faith, their religion is being conflated with Zionism and that people are being unduly accused of anti-Semitism. So Ms. Albanese is not the first. She certainly won't be the last, but it is essentially a manipulation of Judaism and conflation with Zionism by Israel to try and discredit people like Ms. Albanese, who has been very, very articulate and very vocal on what is happening in Gaza. She has called it a Holocaust. She spoke about it yesterday at the Mandela Lecture as being an apocalypse. And she said it is a test of our humanity. She's basically saying that, the people of Gaza and the people of Palestine more broadly have been not only a test for our humanity, but they're actually, instead of us talking about saving Palestine, she says Palestine has saved us as a global community because it has brought out our humanity.
Certainly. And Ayesha, I want to touch on a little bit about when you mentioned about that this, perhaps whether it could be a procedural blind spot, an effort, as you mentioned, to discredit. By extension, what do you think this does in regards to perhaps maybe also discrediting South Africa and its pro-Palestine stance, particularly looking at the case at the ICJ?
Well, I think this was definitely an attempt to smear not only Ms. Albanese, but also the South African government by making it look incompetent. And that's why I say it would be very interesting to know what incentive if any, was offered to the person or people at the DOJ who facilitated this illegally and unconstitutionally, because it is certainly an attempt to smear South Africa's justice system, because Mr. Ramaphosa, President Ramaphosa, and the officials at DIRCO and various other government departments have made it very clear that we will not be dropping the ICJ case, and have also welcomed last week's announcement by the International Criminal Court, which is the court that investigates and then prosecutes individuals involved in things like genocide and ethnic cleansing. It's made it very clear, the ICC made it very clear that it was not going to drop the case against Israeli President Prime Minister Netanyahu and his former chief of the military, Yoav Gallant. And so it's the ICC has stood firm, which is wonderful to see. It's a victory for human rights. It's a victory for the upholding of democratic process around the world and respect for multilateral organizations. And as is the ICJ case, which is the case against the state of Israel that was initially brought by South Africa, because South Africa and we as South Africans know what apartheid is. We recognize it, and we recognize when apartheid becomes more than a crime against humanity, it becomes genocide. And the ICJ, in its interim measures, has confirmed this, and from the very beginning, from January last year, saying that there's a plausible case of genocide in Gaza. While it has not made a definitive ruling, genocide experts around the world, including Israeli genocide scholars and Jewish genocide scholars from various parts of the world, have said there is a genocide happening in Gaza and there is ethnic cleansing happening in the West Bank and East Jerusalem. Now, if people who study this for a living can say that almost unanimously across the globe, then really it is time that we as a global community stood together to ensure that when the UN said never again, when the world said never again after the Jewish Holocaust in Germany at the end of World War II, when we said never again, that we actually meant never again. This is a genocide which, unlike the other recent ones in Rwanda and Bosnia, etc., this is one that's been live streamed to us. We've each individually, if we wished, been able to see it happening. And it is not, it's an appalling thing to see happening. But nobody can say, as they said in World War II, as they said of Rwanda, or they said of Bosnia, or the various other genocides that preceded them, we didn't know.
Yeah.
There is no one who can claim ignorance. If they do, it is because they are willfully ignorant.
And I want to also bring in Ms. Albanese's lecture last night. You touched on it a bit, but there were very strong moments where she made direct parallels, essentially, between what happened here in apartheid, our own country, and of course what is happening in Palestine. Talk to us a little bit as well about the pressure that she put on South Africa, specifically when it comes to the issue of coal. This seems to be a burning point, despite the country, of course, taking on that role on, amplifying the human rights violations that is happening in Palestine, in Gaza. There is still the reality of that very burning issue.
Absolutely. And as Ms. Albanese so rightly pointed out, and so did former Minister of DIRCO, Naledi Pandor, Dr. Pandor, both pointed to the culpability and the complicity of business in war crimes during apartheid, and now more recently in other genocides, and now particularly in the occupied Palestinian territories, including Gaza. So the fact that South Africa is supplying about 40% through its business entities, amongst them African Rainbow Minerals and Glencore, is supplying about 40% of Israel's coal. That alone, it's powering not only Israeli civil society and households, but it is powering the military capability of the Israeli state. And so it should be held complicit and culpable in this genocide. And, we should, the BDS movement here and the South Africa Palestine movement, etc., have called for a boycott, of South African coal leaving our shores to go and power this genocide. Now, as I said, it's about 40% of Israel's coal needed. But in South African terms, it's only about 2 to 3% of our coal exports. And surely, being such a small percentage of our coal exports, we can and should find other markets for that 2 to 3%, rather than sending it to Israel and bloodying our hands, our South African businesses' hands and souls through genocide, through helping to commit a genocide by powering the state that is doing it.
All right, well, international relations expert Ayesha Kajee there speaking to us as we continue, of course, to monitor that situation and hopefully get some answers as that investigation continues in the Minister's office. Thank you for your time.